Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. And today, this is an important topic. It's just this idea, is there a God? And it's just not that simple, because if somebody asked me, do you believe in God? I would have to know what they mean by God, because there's such a huge range there, and a lot of it is just hocus pocus, ridiculous, really. And but at the same time, much of it is, depending on the definition, it's profoundly significant. And I really think that the best angle of approach, especially because there's so much bias and confusion around it, might be first to look at it as just purely science. We're not going to stop there. That's just a starting place. But nevertheless, I think it helps us to get clear on the nature of the whole thing. And with science, the place to start really is just there is a unified field. It's one thing out of which all things emerge. And, it's the cutting edge of modern physics, isn't it? The super particle, or they have different names for it. But it's the transcendent, which is the field of pure consciousness. And it's very significant that some of the major leaders in modern physics are saying the more they study the unified field, the more they realize they're just studying consciousness, which is what ancient Vedic literature has been saying for all these years. Swami Muktananda even said, it's all just consciousness, the play of consciousness, So what we want to do is take I would say a sober look at, okay, what's the relationship that we have with that field of pure consciousness, pure isness, the unified field, oneness, God, if you will. And I think really the most amazing thing about it is that unified field of physics, which seems so abstract and distant and unrelated to personal life and daily life, actually is very intimately connected to our daily lives. If we can just be innocent about our experience, everyone's experience, then there it is right there. There's an essence to every individual's being, and it's of utmost importance to them. And all living things, all things have a connection to that, and it's deeply important. As I've said in the past, even an earthworm, it just has this instinct to protect that being, that soul, that life, that source of life. And so if the sun comes out and the earthworm is on the surface, it burrows down into the earth to protect its life. We feel our connection with that. And so from that perspective, the idea is there a God? It becomes an absurd question, because we all feel it, we all sense it, we all protect it, we all live for it. And we see it in the eyes of our loved ones. We sense it in the eyes of our loved ones. It's what love is all about. Love is just the sensing, the perception of that one thing that's the source of everything within others. But you see how quickly we can get off on a tangent with that. Oh, yeah, okay, well, you're one with the source of everything, and isn't it beautiful? And what happens then is we get off on some foolish emotional tangent, really, with the thing. And it's not that we want to just be completely sterile and objective and scientific about it. No, the emotional component of it is exquisite. But it needs, that's the soaring of the kite that needs a stabling tail. So then the question comes up, okay, let's say, okay, great, I get it. There is a God, there is a unified field. It's the one thing that's the source of everything. But how does that apply to our daily life? And we sense it, okay, I get that too. But, is there anybody out there? Is there anybody watching? Is there anybody helping? Is there anybody involved? And so then it can bring out this idea that, well, God is paying attention to everything and helping direct it in the direction he thinks it should go, and like that. And it doesn't really work that way. I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts that oftentimes when I talk about my desire to complete Mount Soma and how much work it'll be and everything, and people will often respond and say, well, if it's God's will, God will take care of it. And the thing is, my response to that is always yes, but God works, if you're going to look at it that way, then God works through individuals. As individuals, we feel it within ourselves. We have a motivation within ourselves. And because really, there are two components here, and they seem contradictory. One component, it's just karma. For example, whether or not, when they tried to assassinate Donald Trump and just grazed his ear, and somebody might say, well, God was watching, God was intervening. Well, we don't want to get simplistic about it, because on the one level, it was just karma. God didn't come down from the heavens and wave a magic wand and fix it. At the same time, there is such a thing, and you could say these are angels of God if you want, but there is such a thing as guardian angels and people that are not in a physical body, but that are attentive very much so to the earth and what's going on. And they can help. But now the question there becomes, is that karma or is it free will? Is it divine intervention? Divine intervention means that, okay, we have this cause and effect thing, pure karma, just Newtonian physics, really. And we are very much a result of that. As I've said, our lives are determined much more by our karma than we think. We don't have as much free will as we think. It may feel like we're free, but really it's karmic. It's just how the brain waves are functioning. And that also applies to guardian angels and that. But the thing is, what determines the nature of that karma as far as it being in a positive and helpful direction? Well, that has to be, that is a function of the degree to which we are living in harmony with nature. And in that sense, we could say in harmony with God. And that's physics. It's like when my older daughter was just a little kid, we were in Florida on vacation, and, we'd be standing in the water, and when a wave would come, I'd say, in phase, and the wave would come, and we'd both go up in there like that. And then the next wave would come, and I'd say, out of phase, and I'd lean into it, and the water would slam and knock me down, and my daughter would start laughing. She thought it was hilarious. In phase, out of phase. It's just like that. You can live in harmony with the laws of nature or out of harmony with the laws of nature. And that determines whether or not you receive the support of nature. And we could say that that's God's will, but at the same time, it's just karma. It's just mechanics, But now, what about prayer, or is there a way of receiving the blessings and the supportings of nature? And that too, in one sense, you could look at it like it's just physics. You could. And that's the idea that if there's this big, huge reservoir of water. It's just sitting there. It's not trying to get involved. It's just minding its own business. And but if you take a conduit and attach it, take it and then the water and touch it into that reservoir, then the water can flow, and it can fill your life. That's just physics. That's just technology. So in that sense, we could say that prayer is really, and we're looking at this all from the perspective of physics now, admittedly, but from that perspective, we could say it's just the mechanic of tapping into the reservoir. The water is there, you need to tap into it. And there are various ways you can do that, and they have varying degrees of effectiveness, of efficacy. Simply thinking of God, thinking of that, feeling into it within your own self, that's a form of prayer. Commitment to what you feel is, we could say decency, or depends on, some people have aversion to the word divine, but if you don't, then you could say feeling into that, living up to that, that's some form of prayer. The other form of prayers is really when you get down on your knees and you pray to God. But it's all a function really of how much you're holding up that conduit and tapping into the ocean. There's a mechanic to it. And then it gets into the sophistication, because the more sophisticated that is, the more technologically, lack of a better word, correct or effective that is, then the more you receive the support of nature, the support of God. And all too often, people oftentimes, they want to approach God on their terms, not on God's terms. Now, what do I mean by that? There is a science to it. There is a technology to it. There is a physics to it. A cell phone works. Why? Because it's constructed in a manner that's in harmony with nature. And you can say, well, I would rather my cell phone just be a stick that I can talk into and people hear me. And the technology isn't there. And so they're varying. And so the idea is we're speaking to communing with nature on nature's terms, not our own desires for what nature's terms should be. And we really get into trouble there, not just in the form of our individual convictions, but also in the form of what we're taught, be it in a religious institution or a group or whatever. There are more sophisticated, we could say it's all different degrees of prayer. Meditation, you might say, is the highest form of prayer that an individual can do, you could say. Why? Because you're bringing your awareness to that transcendental level that you sense inside you, but there's a technology, there's a technique to how to do that. That's what we teach. Type in Michael Mamas on YouTube. Go to my channel and you'll see there. I teach the technique right there. It's a form of meditation. Too many forms of meditation are in this former approach that, I think I heard that if I still my mind and focus, then I'm communicating with the absolute or whatever. And those are trying to approach and commune with the unified field, with God, from the perspective of your own convictions, as opposed to the way nature actually works. So it has to be natural. So is anybody there? Yeah, sure. The unified field is there. It's everywhere. Is it involved? Not really. Really, it's a silent witness, but you can tap into that value. Then there are also, though, the beings that aren't in the physical body. We call those guardian angels, and they can help. With that assassination attempt with Trump, we could ask, well, was that just karma? Was it all just karma? And if so, were there guardian angels involved? Feels to me like there were, but it's largely karmic, and it's because we all function again. It's not just us that humans that function mostly karmically with some degree of free will, but it's also um guardian angels. But see, if we don't talk enough that way, we get off in la la land. If we talk too much that way, it's all just physics. Then we kind of sterilize the beauty of life, love and the guardian angels, if you will, and how they love and look after. I mean, that's all very real and very beautiful. But see, one has to be tempered by the other. There's a king and queen to the universe. There's physics and there's the personified component. And they both have to go hand in hand. So, is God listening? It depends on the degree to which we are attempting to commune in a manner that is consistent with nature, not how we want it to be, but how it actually is. And is God helping? Well, the degree to which you align with nature and Mother Nature, in phase, out of phase, the more support of nature we receive. And that's the beautiful thing about Vedic knowledge is the understanding of the mechanic is very sophisticated. It's not just made up ceremonies. It's cognized ceremonies that are very much in alignment with how nature functions. And that includes pujas, havans, all sorts of yajnas, but they're highly sophisticated technologies, I remember once I told Punjaji that what pundits do, it's like they're mechanics of unified field technology. So they're basically cosmic mechanics. And he liked that. He started laughing. He thought it was great, So here's the other amazing thing is this idea of astral echoes. In other words, there are principles in nature, and there are echoes of that. So in other words, more superficial understandings of that, like, it's all God. Okay, great. It's all God. You can get off on a really ridiculous tangent with that one, can't you? And sit there and, pray to an earthworm, or I don't know. I can't think of a good analogy, but just a superficial expression or attempt to manifest that emotional indulgence. There's something called bhava, which is commonly thought of as an emotional path to enlightenment, and that's also oftentimes really a superficial expression that really gets people off on tangents. Is just emotional indulgence in that arena. So there is such a thing as bhava. Anandamaya Ma went into incredible states of bhava, But what that was, it was largely physiological. It was allowing the physiology to align with nature and harmonize with that and feel the waves of the bliss of the absolute flowing through the physiology versus getting caught up in just emotional la la land and going off on ridiculous tangents. But now, I don't mean to say that if you go into church or you go into the temple or whatever and feel some emotion, that's beautiful. And to really feel that, it's magnificent. But we have to understand, you see, these two components of it. There's the science of it, there's the physics of it, there's the mechanics of nature involved in it. And then there's also just personality tangents. And so as we refine our physiology, as we mature our relationship with all these different religious principles, it becomes more effective and it becomes more real. And it keeps us from going off on some, out there tangent. So Here's the other thing that's important to keep in mind about, the unified field and the personified value of the unified field, which we call God. There are all these different religions, and I'm just so tired of, well, which one is right? They're all right. But in another sense, they're all wrong because they're all formed. They came into being. They were birthed by this idea that we feel this communion, this sense of this divinity deep within us. And so when a teacher comes and teaches the knowledge, like Christ or Krishna or whomever, we can feel the wisdom of their teachings, and we form religions around that. And really, then they're all about the same one thing. They're all about the unified field. And in some cultures, that embodied correlate to that is Jesus, and in others it's Krishna, and in others it's Muhammad. Or you could say it's all Jesus emerging in different forms. It's Krishna, it's Muhammad, or it's all Muhammad, or it's all Krishna. And Krishna just emerging as Christ, for example. Different personified representations of the same one thing. And what you call that one thing is really up to your religious orientation, Jesus or whatever. And that's fine. In fact, it's good, because that's the essence of cultures, and cultures culture the awareness of people. And that's why it's such a shame. And I think really what triggered this podcast, is I was watching the news and they were talking about, getting religion out of schools, and prayer shouldn't be in schools. And, oh, there's a Christmas tree there, but what about a Jewish Star of David? And, what about all? The thing is, different cultures, different lands have different predominant orientations that culture and feed and support the ability for the people on that land to live in harmony with nature. And it doesn't mean a hodgepodge. It doesn't have to be a hodgepodge. When I was in India, it wasn't like I looked at their practices and said, well, where's the Christmas tree? That's not fair. Well, how come they're celebrating Hinduism and not Christianity? That's ridiculous. It's the interface, the angle of approach to that one thing that is enlivened in, strong in, and cultures the awareness of the people in that land. And so in the United States, arguably it's Christian, right? Judeo-Christian, whatever. And we have to honor that, because it's like, what do we culture? We culture yogurt. We culture a fine wine. And if you get in there and you mess up the culturing process, you stir it up, then it creates vinegar. It doesn't create a fine wine, And it's the same kind of thing. And we need to get that. We really need to get that. I think that's basically, Scotty, you got anything else?
Yeah. This week, oddly enough, I had a couple of talks about this subject, and with my mom. She's been dealing with my aunt, who has had dementia, and she's really going into the depths of that.
Yeah.
And talking about I'm going to pray to Jesus and God and this and that, and we were talking about it, and I was kind of using the analogy that you've used in the past of like the billiard balls and on all that, showing, and because I was like, what do you mean by God? That what you had said earlier,
Yeah.
And it was almost like I was trying to convey that God has made this billiard table with all these billiard balls. It was his creation,
and then once those billion balls are rolling, it's all just karma, cause and effect.
Yeah, because we were talking about how she's interacting. I wanted her to get some help to help her deal with my aunt. And she's like, well, I need to do this. And all the, it was going over the, she was sure that she had to do it, and she was going to do it until, basically she died, help my aunt. And I'm like, that's one way of looking at it, but it's Bobby's or my aunt's karma, that got her to where she is. Also, there's a big catching things going on.
It's an interesting thing. Caring, that has a degree of support, of course.
Right.
Prayer has some degree of support, of course. Doing havans and pujas and things like that. Technology, it has a degree of support. But there are other ways of communing with God that can be more efficacious in particular situations, which could be proper medical intervention.
Right.
And there's so much stuff out there that people, don't really pay attention to. My primary care physician, I really like him. He's a really nice guy, but he's straight allopathic, So that's the idea. You turn over different stones and see what lies under each one. And there's so many different approaches to, what is it? Living in harmony with nature, living in harmony with God. Right. I know I gave a lecture once to a bunch of MDs. They did a long weekend workshop on natural healing. And I went there at the end of the last day. They had me come give a talk. And I said to them, what is natural healing? They had no idea. Oh, it's using herbs. And what natural healing is, it's healing with an eye on, and we do this in all forms of life, all aspects of life, be it business, be it study of science, be it everything. How can we align more with the infinite intelligence and coherence and harmony and structure within nature itself? And to do that as a healing modality, that's natural healing. So in a particular instance, a good slug of synthetic penicillin can be the most natural healing available in a given situation. Not that because it's all we have available, and it gets gets rid of the infection enough that they can start to function more in harmony with the homeostasis and the inner intelligence. So whatever arena you're in, if it's working with your kids, if it's playing a musical instrument, you name it, understand it from the perspective of this fundamental principle that we talked about here today, that it's foundational to existence, and therefore it's foundational to all technology of life, no matter what aspect of life we're talking about. Good. I guess that's it, Scotty. Thanks, everybody. Anything else?
Oh, no, it's okay. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll talk with you again next week.